Good morning. I think we're going to get started here. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Tom Loper, Dr. Tom Loper. I am the Dean of the School of Management and Social Justice. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our seminar, Hit the Target Market, Develop Communication Strategies That Really Work. I'd also like to send a special shout out to more than 200 members, virtual attendees who are joining us from across the country, including early risers in Colorado, Arizona, Texas, and even California. And I just found out we have folks on board from Europe as well, Europe and Canada. So it's just amazing what's happening with technology. And speaking of technology, I just have a little ad-libbing to do before I go over to a phone over there. Our speakers' planes were canceled yesterday. One starting at noon, another one starting at 6 o'clock. So we're going to be doing this through the miracles of modern technology. The show must go on. So we're going to be doing this remotely from from Lexington, Kentucky. So I apologize for not getting word to you sooner, but this was like 8:30 last night. We were still working out how to make this work for you this morning, and we think everything's going to go ahead just as planned. Just a little difference in terms of personal contact, but I think we're going to be very pleased with the way this is all going to work out. So today's event is part of our Hot Topics, Bold Thoughts in the New America, a lecture series that explores topics on the forefront of national discussions in diverse areas such as education, business, and nonprofit management. And I have to now go over to the other phone there and complete the rest of my presentation so that it ties right back into the presentation that our remote speakers will be hearing, okay? Good morning. Good morning, Sarah. So I'll be beginning my presentation then by welcoming everybody in, especially our remote folks. We've got over 200 folks from all over the country and even the world, tuning in today. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let me just get into my presentation and we'll clarify a few things related to technology in a moment. Today's event is part of our Hot Topics, Bold Thoughts in the New America, a lecture series that explores topics on the forefront of national discussion in diverse areas such as education, business, and nonprofit management. It is sponsored by BayPath's Master of Science in Higher Education Administration program, a totally online graduate program offering 4 areas of concentration: enrollment management, institutional advancement, general administration, online teaching, and program administration. We have been holding these breakfasts since 2006. Over the years, our successful Hot Topics events have made us realize how much people appreciate the opportunity to take a couple of hours out of their day to travel to our campus and now to attend virtually, to learn and network with other professionals. We hope that you too will leave with an idea or connection that will positively impact your workplace and put us on your radar for upcoming lectures and webinars. An event such as this would not be possible without the helping hands and support of many individuals, too numerous to mention. But I would like to extend a special thanks to Ann Canton, our can-do administrative assistant in the School of Management and Social Justice, whose organizational flair makes these gatherings such a success. Thank you, Ann. Thank you. I know you are all eager to hear what Sarah has to say, but first I would love to briefly share with you what's happening on our BayPath campus, and perhaps for some of you, to answer the question, who is BayPath? BayPath is a 4-year private college founded in 1897 and located in the heart of New England, almost equidistant from Boston and New York City. We have over 2,400 students at our Longmeadow campus and satellite campuses in Sturbridge, Massachusetts and Burlington, Massachusetts. We offer undergraduate degrees for women, and through the American Women's College, accelerated degrees programs for adult women online or on campus through our 1-day-a-week college, and graduate degrees for men and women on campus and online. In fact, our graduate programs are niche and career focused and include recent degree additions such as the MS in Cybersecurity Management, MS in Accounting, and MS in Leadership and Negotiation, all totally online. And I'm going to be sensitive to time and suggest that if you want to learn more about BayPath or our programs, just check out our website for more information. Today, I also have the distinct pleasure to announce that our MS in Higher Education Administration is partnering with Noel Levitz to offer an online certificate in enrollment management. We are very excited about this program. It combines specialized course content based on the expertise of Noel Levitz professionals with BayPath's experienced professors, state-of-the-art systems, and support network. If you want to keep up with the latest developments and best practice in our industry, I encourage you to take a look into this program that begins this fall. Now on to our program. I'd like to now introduce you to Dr. Lauren Way, Director of the Master of Science in Higher Education Administration Program. We'll introduce you to today's speaker, Sarah Coen.
So good morning, everyone, and good morning to our many viewers across the country. We actually had close to 300 register for our event today, and a good 200 are online. So I'm not used to carrying around a cell phone and texting at a social event, but forgive me, I've been talking with our keynote speaker since early this morning. So not long ago, our keynote speaker posted a blog on the Noel Levitt's website with 7 key steps to creating college marketing and communication plans. And to her surprise, this blog received over 6,000 hits, and it quickly became one of the most popular blog entries on the site. Higher education professionals from around the world have used Sarah Coen's strategies to create meaningful and impactful messaging for their target audiences. And today we have Sarah here with us at Bay Path virtually, to treat us to an in-depth presentation on this very popular topic. Sarah Coen is the Vice President of Consulting Services at Noel Levitt's, which is a premier enrollment management firm serving educational institutions throughout North America for 40 years. Sarah herself has nearly 2 decades of experience in new student recruitment, financial aid, orientation, and staff development. She's especially known for her skills at developing and implementing comprehensive communication plans and at applying predictive modeling towards enrollment management. Sarah has served more than 30 institutions in the United States and Canada during her consulting career with Noel Levitt's, and that has included small and large 4-year privates and 2- and 4-year public institutions, as well as system-level projects in some states. I was reading up on some of the results that Sarah has helped her clients achieve, and they are actually quite impressive. And the areas in which she's helped her clients to excel in these ways the most are inquiry pool development, relationship management, communication flow development, database management, campus visit programming, staff development, and financial aid strategy. Before her position at Noel Levitt, Sarah worked in public relations and served as Director of Admissions at multiple colleges and universities, helping to engineer record gains in applications, enrollment, and net revenue. And now, live from Lexington, please welcome Sarah Coen to our Bay Path screen.
Maybe some shuffling of papers or something. So if you're on the phone, please mute your phone by either hitting *6 or the mute button on your keypad. And then to unmute, you can hit #6. And also want to just let everyone know that the slide deck from today will be made available. So I will be sending this out. Actually, I will send this to our friends at Bay Path, and they can make this available to you. So I just wanted to begin by saying thank you so much to everyone on the line, as well as and especially to my friends and colleagues at Bay Path College. You may all know, or maybe you don't know, but I am working remotely. I work remotely from my home in Lexington, Kentucky, and I was supposed to actually be on the campus of Bay Path College today. And thanks to some weather-related issues and to the wonderful world of airline travel, I am not at Bay Path College as I wanted to be. So we're going with Plan B this morning, and so we apologize for a few of our technical glitches, but we have been working. We worked sort of last night and this morning to try to make sure that we can bring this presentation to all of you remotely. So again, welcome to everyone. Thank you so much, and we are ready to begin. So for those of you that may not be aware of Noel Levitt, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about who we are very briefly. I see some folks online that I believe have worked with Noel Levitt in the past. Noel Levitt is a comprehensive enrollment management consulting firm. And we do partner with campuses all across the country, as well as internationally. And we work with campuses on all sorts of enrollment management areas. You can see here on this first slide the enrollment funnel. And we are a bit obsessed with the enrollment funnel because we think it's important to help campuses at all funnel stages. And so we really are the only company that works from recruitment to retention. Again, on all funnel stages, we work with campuses on research, marketing, and enrollment management, financial aid, recruitment, all sorts of areas. We also host a national conference every year, usually in the first or second week in July. This is the most comprehensive enrollment management conference that's out there. This is the National Conference on Student Recruitment, Marketing, and Retention. This year, the conference is held in Chicago on July 8th through the 10th. And we're very pleased, as you heard a little bit earlier, about our program that we host with Baypath College. And there will be a session this year actually presented by Dr. Way at our national conference. So we hope that we are able to see some of you there. And we are still taking registrations for that conference. It does fill up. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the Knoll Levis website to learn a little bit more about that. So let's dive into the sort of the meat of the conversation this morning. And I wanted to cover sort of 4 areas for today. And because we have such a variety of folks who are in the audience, both at Baypath College and online, I am trying to discuss areas of communications plan development that will be important and will be actually trying to relate some of this to the many different types of folks who are on the line. Because we have folks who work in admissions, marketing, work with current students, work in alumni. So we're going to try and keep this as sort of as general as possible. And I hope that each one of you can leave today with 1 or 2 things that you find of value that you can implement back on your own campuses. So the 4 areas that we're going to talk about in this order, first is a little bit about understanding your audience and just knowing sort of what's happening out there in the world of higher education in terms of some trends and then expectations of today's prospective students. And then we'll talk about some communication fundamentals, some things that may not be rocket science, but I think it's always good to remember to go back to the basics sometimes. And then we'll talk about communicating the right messaging. So what is that message that you're trying to share with prospective students, current students, alumni, whatever your audience is. And then we'll finally wrap up by talking about some steps to actually build your communication plan. Again, we may have a lot to cover today, but I would rather have more information to share with you, and I'd rather give you too much than not enough. And as I said, we will make these slides available, so you will have this and you will be able to see all of the resources that I've used for this presentation as well. So as we think about understanding your audience and understanding who you're communicating with, I would refer you to several resources, and these are resources that are available on the Knoll Levis website. I think many folks are surprised when they find out that we have all of these white papers and all of this research that really is available to you free of charge. You can go, again, you can go to the Knoll Levis website and download these papers whenever you would like. There's also additional information, of course, that's not Knoll Levis data, and you will see all of those citations as I move through the slide deck. You will see all of those, so you can have access to some additional information. So let's start sort of with the 40,000-foot view of kind of what's happening out there and sort of the mega trends of higher education. And if you joined the Baypath Hot Topics session last year, you would have heard a lot more information about this from our president, Kevin Crockett. He presented much more information on kind of what's happening out there in the world of higher education. I don't have time to go over all of that today, but I wanted to give you sort of a brief snapshot of, I think, what's sort of happening out there. And some of this you are probably already experiencing on your own campuses. but it's good to have the actual data that maybe support what you're experiencing and what you're feeling and what you may be trying to share with others on campus. So the enrollment growth on college campuses is expected to slow, and you can see that if you look at what's happened over the last 40 years. From 1963 to 1980, the higher education grew at a rate of about 5.6%. You can see the next 10 to 13 years, that was almost cut in half. And then from 2011 to 2022, it's expected to be less than 1%. So if you're feeling like it's more and more challenging to recruit students, to retain students, you're absolutely correct. You're not making this up. It is more challenging to do so. And if you look at what's happening in terms of the growth across institution types, you can see on this slide that across all sectors there has been a 0.8% drop, and this is the 5th consecutive time that's happened. And I'm going to pause for 1 second. I think we have some folks who maybe your screen it looks kind of small. So if that's the case, there should be an icon in your lower right-hand corner that you can take it to full screen. It's a little icon that has 4 arrows, and so you should be able to make it bigger and make it fit your screen. So for those of you that are having difficulty, if you want to try that, that should work for you. Again, the joys of technology when we're going to Plan B on our presentation today. But again, I would encourage all of you to go to the National Student Clearinghouse data. You can find this for the type of institution that you are, but you can again just see here that we have not seen the growth that we have seen in the past years, and in fact, we're continuing to see some drops in enrollment. Some of you have probably seen this map, and I kind of hate sharing this sometimes because it is rather depressing. But if you just look at the growth in the number of high school graduates, you can see that the numbers are not very encouraging. And if you're in the Northeast, as many of you are, they're even less encouraging. But I do think it's important, if you have not seen this, that you understand what's happening in your state. So whether it's, the state that your institution is in and your surrounding states in terms of your primary market areas, so you can see what's happening in terms of those number of high school graduates. We are in the midst of a 16% decrease in the number of white high school graduates, but an increase, and this is probably not a surprise to any of you on the phone, an increase in the number of Hispanic students as well as Asian Pacific Islanders. So I think the reason this is important is as you think about your communication, you may be communicating and you are communicating to a different audience. And so there may be different things that are important to the Hispanic population versus the white student population, Asian Pacific Islander, the African American population. As you think about how you're trying to communicate those key messages, we do need to keep in mind who you're communicating to and what is in fact important to them. For those of you on the line who are really focused more on retention and completion, we're seeing, of course, this becoming even more important for campuses because as the intake or the number of new students is decreasing, there is much more pressure on those of you who work on retention to keep the students you already have. So again, the importance of communicating effectively to that group of students is critically important. Now, in addition to sort of the numbers of students and the makeup of the students that are out there to either recruit or retain, I think it's also important for you to understand what is important to the student. Why do they enroll at your institution? Cost, financial aid, and academics continue to really be the driving factors for students sort of across institution types. So you can see on this slide, and this is from our factors to enroll study that we do, whether you work at a four-year private, a four-year public, a community college, a for-profit institution, cost, financial aid, and academics are the most important. So as you're building a communication plan, how often and how are you communicating those messages? When I work with campuses across the country, I often find that they do a good job talking about cost and financial aid, and a good job talking about location and how friendly the campus is. Very rarely do I see schools do a really good job of promoting academics, outcomes, and value. So as you think about your institution, how are you promoting academics? Which sounds kind of silly that we wouldn't do that because we work in higher education, but we are really good at promoting things that are not really all that important to students. They want to know, if I attend your institution, tell me what am I going to be able to do with a degree from the institution. And that's true for incoming students as well as current students. So this is just breaking the data down a little bit more for you. You can see for four-year private institutions, again, whether it's new students or upper-class students, cost, financial aid, and academics are still the most important factors for them. The same is true for the public sector. Now, it does change a little bit if you work with adult students. So obviously there are, I think, lots of pressures on campuses today to really promote and help and recruit and retain adult students, online students, additional populations besides that traditional, high school or transfer market. So academic reputation and convenience are really the most important factors for them. And again, I'm sure this is no surprise to many of you on the phone, but as you market to that adult student, are you able to tell them why this is going to be easy for them? It's convenient. Clearly, adult students are trying to manage other things, family, work, school, so convenience is critically important to those students. If you're promoting and working with the online population, again, not a surprise, but convenience and flexibility are the most important factors for that group. And for our community college students, cost continues to be the top factor. So I do think it's important, depending on the type of institution that you work for and the type of students that are entering your institutions, let's make sure that we understand what's important to them so that we're not communicating messages to them that may be important to us but are not important to them. I think we do, oftentimes in higher education, we do a good job of sort of communicating what we think is important, but it may not be important to the audience that we're serving. So think about those things as you're building your communication plan. And then finally, before we start to talk about some of the fundamentals of communication, think about student satisfaction. So, how satisfied are students today? And unfortunately, this is not really good news either, and I don't mean to be depressing all of you on the phone, but students today, and it's really sort of a cross-sector, although the community college students are a little more pleased, but most students today do not think that the tuition that they've paid was a worthwhile investment. Yeah. Less than 50% at a four-year private, right around 50% at the four-year public. And then, as you can see, 69% for the community college and 59% for career and private schools. So I think while students today know that they need a degree, they still are questioning the value, whether that's they think we charge too much or we're not delivering on the product. It's, we're not sure which is true, but they are still not seeing the value. So we have to do everything we can to really promote the value with students. And again, this is just broken down for traditional students and non-traditional students. So for the traditional population, you can see how satisfied they are. And then if we break that out and look at more non-traditional populations, they do seem to be a little bit more satisfied in our work. So again, not to be, very depressing here on Friday the 13th, but the landscape is changing. If you're working and if you have a communication plan and a set of marketing materials, publications that are the same thing that they were 5 years, 10 years ago, you really need to change that. And as I travel around the country to many college campuses, I do find that a lot of the communication materials, marketing materials are really still very similar to what they were many years ago. So we have to rethink. Things are different today in higher education, and we have to rethink how we're communicating with students. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some communication fundamentals. So a couple of things for you to consider. Again, as I've sort of worked with campuses and experienced successful communication plans, I think there's a couple of things that you need to make sure you're doing to have a successful plan. You need to make sure that you're building and sustaining the relationship, so not a one and done, I've got one good communication and that's all I need. Are you segmenting and targeting your messages? So in other words, do you have different messages to different populations? Are you tracking your messages, and are you tracking what students are doing if there's some sort of a call to action? Are you tracking if students are actually doing that? We have to use electronic communication and telecounseling to supplement, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. I may ask our folks at BayPath, we can hear a little bit of conversation, I think, actually on campus. So you all may want to mute your phone, and then you can unmute when we go to questions. I'm not going to read all of these to you because you can see these on the screen, but I think there are some common problems with written communication systems, and I see them a lot. I see them on a lot of college campuses. One of the big ones is instead of having a series of communications that go out over time, we have a one-and-done approach where we bundle everything and we have a nice folder. Some of you may have those. You have a nice, shiny college folder that you stick everything in and you mail that out. I would encourage you, if you're doing that, to split that up and send that out into a group or a series of messages. That sort of goes along with the second one where there's just sort of batch mailing and not a sequential communication. Some of these things we have already talked about, but we need to make sure that we have materials, our letters that are included with a high-quality publication, that we're using electronic communication. So again, I think I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm going to keep moving on in the sake of time. One question that I do get a lot from colleges is, do students today still want print material? And the answer is yes. A lot of schools tell me I can do everything electronically, and electronic is great, and we do need that as a supplement, but this is data from our e-expectations research, and from this research, at least for the high school population and some traditional transfer students, they do want web information, but almost half still want to receive that printed material. So unfortunately, we can't do away with all of those important pieces that we have electronically. That we have as print. Again, make sure that email is part of your communication flow. I was surprised when I saw the best practices report for this year that we put out at Noel Levitt. The number of institutions, whether it's private, public, or two-year, how many do say that they have a communication plan electronically and that, they think it's effective. So many campuses obviously are communicating with students electronically, and here's just a snapshot of how many emails are being sent to prospective students and parents. So it's a lot, and I'm sharing this with you because, again, I think if you have a communication plan, whether it's in writing or your email, more is better. There are a lot of emails, and while we understand that students today do receive a lot of email messages, I don't think that's a reason for you to say, I'm going to stop communicating electronically because students are bombarded. Students really do still want to communicate with you that way. Don't forget the influencer. This is also a population that I think is often left, that we sort of leave them out and don't really communicate as we should. So again, for the type of institution that you work for, the type of student that you're recruiting and trying to retain, this will vary. So we may be talking about making sure we're influencing the parents if you deal with traditional population. If you deal more with the adult population, do you have any messaging that goes to family or to spouse or employers, community college advisors? How else are you getting that message out there about your programs and the quality of your programs? Because, again, if we're only sending that information to the student, we may be selling ourselves a little bit short. So don't forget the influencers of the students that you're trying to serve. And, of course, social media is important, and this does vary by student population. But I wanted to share this with you because I often hear from campuses that today's students no longer use Facebook. And again, in our most recent survey that we did, and you can get this full report on our website, 75% do still use Facebook, and they use all these other sites as well. But I don't think that Facebook is quite dead. I think they're still using that as a resource.
They never moved on it, did they?
So what are the most important things that they want to see on your website? And this goes right in line with what we've already talked about in terms of those factors to enroll. So as you look at your website for your campus, how easy are these things to find? Can you find academic information, cost, admissions information, and financial aid information pretty easily? My experience with campuses is normally the answer to that is usually no. I often ask my campuses to give me tell me what grade they would give their website, and sometimes it's a B. I would say usually it's a C or a C+. We don't have a whole lot of campuses who say their website is an A, and that's unfortunate because it is critically important that your website is easy to navigate and that this information is readily available. The primary audience for your website should be prospective students, and I'm sure that I have people on the phone that are agreeing with me when I say that, and there are probably some people on the phone and in the audience that disagree with me saying that. But I still think it's important to make sure that we're writing the content and the navigation for our website to cover these important factors and make this information easy for them. And then finally, in terms of the website, is your website mobile friendly? This data I think, is probably a no-brainer for most of us. Do your students have access to a mobile device? Of course they do. And then do they look at websites for colleges on these mobile devices? 56% saying they do. If you really dig into this research, which we don't have time to do today, but if you really dig into this research, you will see that not only are they getting on your website on their mobile device, but they're willing to apply for admission, register for classes. They want to do a lot of things on their tablet or device. So let's move now on to some messaging. And I think as you think about what your messages should be, your key marketing message for your campus needs to be sort of the intersection of what is the demand, what do you do well, what programs do you do well and excel at on campus, and then what does your competition do? So where is your differentiation? And as you think about those key messages, I would encourage you to make sure that that message is, your key messages are well known and that they are the same for admissions, alumni, advising, because I often find on campus if I do focus groups, I get one set of key messages from admissions, a different set of key messages from the faculty, and an even different set of key messages from the administration. It's important that you have a consistent message that you're sending throughout. And then I would just encourage you to develop a sort of a plan where you use this sort of architecture to say, what are the audiences or who are the audiences that I'm trying to communicate with, and then what are those messages by audience? So you can sort of take this rubric and then think about listing out all of your audiences, whether it's prospective students, families, parents, current students, alumni, and then what is important to each one of them. Some messaging might be a little bit more important to particular audiences, And I think that's a kind of a to-do that as a campus you need to sit down and kind of figure this out and work out that messaging architecture. I would also encourage you, as you're thinking about what your key messages are, to make sure that you're not just telling your audience, here are all of the things or the features that we do well. Make sure that as you are sharing what those things are, that you're also telling your audience why that is important. So as you list your key messages, whether it's your academics, your faculty, your location, whatever it is, make sure then you answer the question of so what. So what does that mean to your audience, to students, current students, parents? Again, we often see campuses do a great job of just listing out features and then not really relating what those features are. So often when I'm on a campus, we'll actually do this exercise together. We'll write down all of those key messages, write down all of the features, and then we will add to that list, okay, now let's talk about what the benefit or what the value of that feature is to the audience. And then again, it's important to think, as you're thinking about your communication and your messaging, are you communicating the things that, again, are important to students? And as I look at sort of this graphic, your key marketing messages should be the things that are important to prospective students and that you do well, or that your students are satisfied with. And then on the retention side, again, focus on what is important to your students, and then are there things that currently they're not very satisfied with? We probably need to make sure we're communicating more effectively, how we're trying to improve those things on our campus. We often do a really good job of spending time promoting those things that are not important to students. So, whether it's your new beautiful facility or your great food service or whatever it might be, if that's not really that important to students, don't spend a lot of time promoting those messages. I'd also encourage you, as you think about your audience and who you're communicating to and with, just know that you're not going to be able to influence everyone. Some students will enroll and retain at your institution no matter what you do. Other students will never enroll at your institution no matter what you do. You could have the best communication plan ever. You could give them a full scholarship, pay for their housing. You could do everything, and they're still not going to come. There are students, though, in the middle that you can influence. And so because you cannot spend, you probably don't have time to communicate equally with every single current student or every single prospective student, let's make sure we're trying to identify who are those students that we actually do think we can have a chance to influence and maybe focus our efforts on that group of students. And then finally, do you know what your competitors are doing? And do you know who your real competitors are? I often find that campuses don't really know who they overlap with in terms of applications. So make sure that you understand which competitors are actually sort of in that top 5 competitor set for your students, and then make sure you understand what their messages are. So I would encourage you to, place you or someone on your staff in your competition's inquiry pool. You can't really do that as a current student, but if you can put yourself in, or your dog or your child or somebody's name is in their inquiry pool, and then see what they're sending, see what kind of messaging they're sending, both electronically and in regular mail. All right, so let's move on to the actual plan itself, and I think we're doing fine on time here. A couple of things that I think are really important to consider as you're working on your communication plan. You really need to make sure that you have a goal for the plan. So, what are you trying to do with this communication plan for incoming adult students or incoming traditional students? Assuming you're probably trying to maybe move students to the next stage in the recruitment funnel or the enrollment funnel, or you might be trying to explain a process. Maybe the point of this communication is to get them to register for classes or see an advisor, or pay a deposit? Is it clear what the goal of the communication plan is? And I think this is an area that is often overlooked, and we just assume that, well, I have to have a communication plan, but we don't think very long and hard about what is the goal of the plan and what is the goal of each communication piece that I may be sending. So make sure that you outline that. I think we've probably talked enough about this, but you really do need to have distinct communication plans for each target market. And campuses do not do a good job of this at all. We typically have, for prospective students, one communication plan, and for current students, one communication plan. And we all know that doesn't make sense, but I think sometimes it's a matter of resources, staff resources, budgetary resources. So we send the same thing to all students. And, the last thing that a transfer student wants is to receive a bunch of information about their 4-year experience, about, how to enroll in college when they've already done that before. We have to make sure that our messages are unique for each target market. And again, you're probably trying to move students to the next funnel stage. So as you think about your messaging, make sure you understand what you're trying to have the student do. What I typically find on campus is that we do a really good job of one stage of the funnel. So maybe we have a really good communication plan at the very top of the funnel, and then once a student applies for admission, we don't do anything else. We think, well, they applied, so they're ready to go. Think about each funnel stage and how well do you communicate. Once a student inquires, then do we communicate with them to get them to apply for admission? Once they've applied, do we let them know about their admission status and what all of those next steps are in terms of actually enrolling at your institution? So the next slide that I'm showing you here, and I believe we may have some folks who are having some difficulty seeing the slide, so let me spend some time actually sort of reading some of these bullet points to you. This slide does come from the blog post that I wrote a couple of years ago that Dr. Way mentioned in my introduction. And when I originally wrote this blog, I really was thinking more about just the recruitment of new students, but I think it applies to all audiences, and it's good to sort of have this step-by-step approach. So as you're thinking about your communication plan, whether it's creating a 5 to 7 piece or 3 to 5 pieces or however, many pieces are in the plan, the point is it needs to be a communication plan that has multiple hits. We can't send one thing out and then hope that students remember that we mailed them something or emailed them 2 months ago. Hope they remember all the wonderful things about our institution. Remember to really build the messaging around your academic programs. We need to do a better job on campus of promoting outcomes, promoting that academic message. So I often will recommend that campuses should understand for each one of your programs, maybe not by major because that may get too difficult, but for each academic program, do you have 5 or 6 stories of successful graduates? What are they doing? Are they employed? Are they in graduate school? Are they in law school? Do they have an internship? We should understand what those outcomes are. Our teams should be able to verbalize those, and we should be able to put those outcomes in our communication plan. You have to really make sure that you're enhancing your web presence. I know that is very challenging because that is an expensive endeavor. It's often an expensive endeavor and a time-consuming one, but we really do have to make sure that our web presence is strong, or we will not be communicating effectively with students. The fourth step I've already talked about, that's making sure we create a comprehensive communication plan for the influencers, so thinking about who those influencers are. And the fifth one, I think we don't do very well, which is develop a plan to outline the process for students. We understand the process because we've done it 1,000 times. Your prospective students and your current students probably don't understand the process, and that the process may really scare them and turn them away. So how do they pay their bill? How do they register for class? How do they sign up for orientation? We have to be crystal clear in helping students, whether they're new students or current students or the family members, understand all the things that a student may need to do in the process. Don't underestimate the value of really doing that and really doing a good job with that. The sixth point I think I've talked about enough, which is make sure you have a good electronic communication system. And to that point, what we're finding is that many campuses are outsourcing that. So if you're trying to have a good email communication system, but you're trying to send all of that out just from your campus system, that's probably not going to be very effective. You ought to look into, some other vendors. There are a lot of good vendors that can help you, create your messaging, send out your messaging, and then track who's opening the message, who's forwarding it, who's, sort of taking the next step that you've asked them to do. So I would encourage you, if you're not using an outside vendor, to maybe look into some companies that could do that for you. And then finally, when possible, to support that written and electronic communication with a telecounseling effort. I often hear from campuses that they think that telecounseling is outdated. I still believe that in many cases, picking up the phone and calling students can be effective. I realize that if you're working for a very large institution, that may be very difficult. But if you can focus those efforts on a group of students that you think you can influence, I still believe that recruiting and retaining students is often about building and sustaining the relationship, and sometimes picking up the phone and calling that student, there's no better way to do that. So, I think these 7 steps, while, again, I originally wrote them for really just for incoming students, I think they kind of speak to all of us, whatever our role is on campus. And I was surprised. Dr. Way asked me earlier, as we were preparing for today, how many hits actually did that blog receive? And I knew it was a lot, but I didn't really know how many. And it is over 6,000 people have actually read that blog, or at least went to the site, which I thought was kind of a lot. And to me, it really spoke to me that campuses are struggling with their communication plans and looking sort of for any pointers and tips that are out there. So I hope that some of those will help you. Again, you can find that blog. You find that on the Noel Levitt's website, and I have the link to that right there on that slide for you. The next couple of slides that I'm not really going to talk about very much, I wanted to just share these with you. I put in a few sample communication plans in this slide deck, and encouraging you that as you build these plans that you include written communication, electronic, and phone, and so you can just sort of see the rubric that we have used here. So again, I'm not going to walk through all of these. They are in the slide deck, but I put a sample communication flow for seniors. I also included a sample communication flow for parents. If you are working with traditional students and you'd like to communicate with parents. And then I also included a sample communication flow for some current students. So again, I know that we have many different folks on the line who work in different settings on campus. So some of these areas may not apply to you, but hopefully at least sort of the outline of how we've set up the communication flows will help you a little bit.
It could be done internally easily.
So in terms of a summary, I'm not going to read all of these bullets to you because some of them are similar to what we've already talked about. But I think there's a lot that you need to think about as you're building your communication plan. And often the campuses that I find do a really good job with this, they kind of press the pause button and say, okay, we know everything that we're doing currently. Let's just put that aside for now. Let's do some research, do our homework to make sure we understand, some of the data that I've shared with you, and then also your own competition and your own internal information. Let's make sure we understand that. And then as we look at our messaging, does our messaging really answer what's important to our students? Because I think you will find that probably some of it doesn't. You may have some messaging that's really outdated, and you just still have it in your communication flow because that's always, that's what we've always done. And so we're going to continue to do that. We're really good at that on college campuses. So you may want to just sort of press that pause button and then say, okay, let's look at everything we're doing and really begin to track what we're sending out and how effective it is. And then finally, I would say, make sure that you're reviewing all these communications and all of your messaging with your team annually. And if you don't have an enrollment management committee or an enrollment management group on campus, and when I say enrollment management, I don't just mean the recruitment of new students, but do you, on a regular basis, do you get the folks who work with students, whether it's in recruitment, retention, advising, financial aid, housing? Do you have a group of a committee of those people who sit down on a monthly basis to really talk through all of these strategies and to make sure things are consistent? Another thing that I find often is when you look at the messaging that prospective students get and then you look at the messaging that current students get, there's often a disconnect. So if you have the time to really sit down and look at all of the communication that you send from the time, from prospective students all the way through to your current students, I think you may find that sometimes things don't match up very well and they're not very consistent in the messaging. And if you can improve upon that, I think you will do yourself a world of good in terms of recruiting more students and also potentially increasing those retention and completion percentages on campus. All right, so I think I am going to stop talking now. It looks like we're at about 5 till the top of the hour here. And I know that we have several folks online, and most of you have done a great job of muting your phone, and I really appreciate that. But I am going to pause for a second and just see if there are any questions. And we may have some questions from the folks there on campus at Bay Path. So let me pause and see, Dr. Way, if there are questions from your group. And you will, just as a reminder, you'll need to unmute your phone if you would like to ask a question. And to do that, you need to do #6 to unmute. So are there questions from campus?
Thank you so much, Sarah. That's fantastic. I'm going to turn you over to Professor Way now, and we're going to ask questions off the floor. And if anyone that's remote would like to call in, they can as well.
Okay, and we may need you on campus to get closer to the phone. We can't hear you very well.
Okay, so we have Ann is here with a microphone. If anyone has a question, you can go ahead and Professor Wilkinson from Untitled.
Jim Wilkinson, professor of economics and business at Asnuntuck Community College and advisor to the veterans. Is there a different communication process you see ongoing, especially with the change in what's going on with veterans and getting veterans recruited onto campuses?
Question, someone who's closer to the phone, please. I think the question is about a communication plan for veterans.
You talk, Ron.
I couldn't hear the question because I was going back and forth saying if we put this off of mute, then there's going to be a feedback loop for other people listening.
The question is, yes, just what you said, Sarah. Should there be a different communication plan for veterans, and what have you seen that's working for veterans?
Yes, there should be a communication plan, and we actually have some research about that on the Noel Levitt's website. I apologize that I didn't have that in the slide deck, and I should have. But if you go to the Noel Levitt site, we do have some information about those communication plans. I also have some things from actually one campus in particular that I'm thinking of that does a really good job of communicating with veterans. In fact, they just got an award recently. So I have some information that I could share that might be very pertinent and very specific to your question. So I put my slide up on the screen so you have my email and my phone number. So the person who asked that question, if you would mind to email me, I will send you that information, some very specific information for your veteran communication plan.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes.
Do we have more questions at Bay Path?
Questions? Okay.
Let me just jump in for a second, Dr. Way. We have a couple of people online who are asking about the presentation. And just to remind folks who hopped on late, we will send this presentation out to those that were on the call. And then I have my slide on the screen right now because someone asked about who I was, and there I am. And there's my contact information. So I will certainly take any and all questions over email or phone at a later date as well.
Thank you, Sarah. What is your perspective on texting prospective students?
Was that a question about texting prospective students?
Oh, good.
Yes. So she asked, what is your perspective on texting prospective students?
That is a great question, and I'm going to answer that, but I'm also going to tell you that there is much more detail on that in our e-expectations research that you can find on our website. But I will tell you that when we ask students, when we ask prospective students if they are open to receiving text messages from campuses, the answer is overwhelmingly yes. And many times when I'm on a campus, I will hear, we shouldn't text. They don't want us to bombard their phone. They actually do want to hear from you. Now, I will tell you that sort of as the funnel narrows a little bit, so students at the very top of the funnel, those prospective students, the thousands of students who may be interested, they do want to receive text messages, but once they apply for admission, for example, they are much more interested in receiving a text. So a couple things about that. One, yes, they are open to text messages. Two, they are interested in text messages that are sort of about pertinent things like deadlines, dates, reminders. So, remember you have to pay your deposit by this date. Remember you are supposed to sign up for orientation by this date. Remember we're missing a high school transcript or a college transcript. And then the other thing that you all, should be aware of is you may know about the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. As we are texting students and using their cell phone, we should be asking if we are allowed to do that. So as you're getting information from students all the way at the inquiry stage, you should be asking for the cell phone number and then asking, a question about, is it okay if we contact you on your cell phone? Again, we're supposed to be getting permission from students to do that, but students overwhelmingly are saying that yes, they will receive and respond to text messages from schools that they are interested in. So I hope that answers your question. Again, there's a lot more detail on that in our e-expectations research.
Thank you, Sarah.
More questions? I think we're through.
Yep, can I ask a
Go
question?
ahead.
I'm curious with all of
Right.
the consulting, Sarah, you can hear me?
I can hear you, yes?
Great. With all of the consulting you're doing around the country right now, what are the questions that enrollment management professionals are asking you most in the last 6 months? Are there any trends that you're finding that people are coming to you with new or emerging issues that you're hearing the most?
Don't see that.
Yes, I will answer that. And I do think we can hear some conversation. So again, if you're on, if you could mute your phone, please. And I'm sorry I keep saying that. But honestly, Dr. Way, I think the question that I get asked the most lately is, tell me how other institutions are doing in terms of enrollment. And unfortunately, the reason that I get that question is because many campuses are struggling to meet and exceed goals. And a big part of that is some of the information we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. It is much more difficult, and this is the reality of the situation. It is much more difficult
to recruit and retain students. So I think there's two questions that I get the most. One is, how do we look compared to other institutions? Again, because it is often very difficult to really meet those enrollment goals. And two, can you help me recruit and retain adult students, international students, online students? In other words, lots of colleges are looking for alternate revenue streams because the days of a bunch of traditional students, sort of being out there to recruit we're not living in that world anymore. I often say that when I was on a campus, and the last time I was actually, vice president of enrollment was 8 years ago, and it was so much easier then. It is much easier to meet a class when there's a whole bunch of high school graduates and we don't have the same financial situation that we're in. I mean, students today are less willing, and parents today are less willing to pay for a private education than they ever were before. So we have campuses saying, tell me how to build programs for adult students, online students, international students. I think what oftentimes this leads to is a really much bigger discussion about a strategic enrollment plan. So not just what is sort of that annual recruitment or annual retention plan, but are we as an institution thinking much more broadly about where we should be in 3 to 5 years? And our strategic enrollment planning consulting division at Noel Levitz has just expanded immensely for that reason, because so many campuses say, we know we need a bigger plan, a much more, long-range plan. we need help to build that. So I think that's probably a long answer to your question, but I really can't stress it enough because it is just much different recruiting and retaining students today than it was 5 or 6 or 7 years ago.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Tom Loper with a question. With all of the focus now on different market segments and using different types of media, traditional and digital media, and your emphasis on the importance of integrating all of these approaches, it begs the question of cost and what's happening to trends and costs for enrollment marketing today. And do you have any data about trends, and do you have any data about relative amounts of money that are being spent or percentages that are being spent on different components of the marketing plan?
Yes, we do, and that's another very good question. We have a report, actually, again, you can get free on our website. It's our cost to recruit report. Cost to recruit, I think it's called Cost to Recruit, but you'll find it on there. But basically what it shows you is what have been the trends over the years in terms of how much does it cost to recruit a single student. I don't know that we have the same data on retention, so those of you on the line who work with current students, I don't know that we have that same level of data because there's just a little more convoluted. But on the recruitment side, we have been tracking over the years, how much does it cost to recruit a single student, and how many staff members on average does it take to recruit a single student? And this really does vary by population, so it's going to vary depending on what type of institution you are. But the cost to recruit students have gone up, one of the biggest areas that has gone up is thinking about your website, and really not just the website, but the web and electronic media, paid interactive marketing, social media, not that those things in and of themselves are expensive, but you have to have someone on campus who can manage those things. So I think as we think about staffing, the two areas where we have seen an increase in staffing, one has been on the web and social media side, where positions are being created to really handle all of that, and the other is on the communication side, is someone in the recruitment and in the retention area to manage the communications, to manage the the student information system, whatever system you're using. You have to have some good CRM and your student information system to help you manage all this. So we have not seen the increases in number of recruiters per se, we've seen the increase on someone to manage the electronic side and someone to manage. I mean, you really have to have a person or people, depending on how big your institution is, to manage the communication plan. If you're trying to manage that as a sort of an add-on job to someone else, and there's probably people on the line right now who are nodding their heads saying that's exactly how we do it, that's probably not going to be very effective. It takes a full-time person or full-time people to manage a really good comm flow. And you'll see, if you looked at that, if you looked at our best practices report and our cost to recruit report, the best practices are for recruitment and retention, you will see those figures pretty clearly. And if anyone is, if any of you are looking for that information and you can't find it, just email me and I will just send you a copy of it so you're not kind of digging around for it. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And are there any other questions from the online contingency?
I'm going to look. I'm going to go over here and see if we have. Actually, we do have a couple of questions online. So, Dr. Way, if I can answer a few of those, do we have time for that?
We do. Yep.
Okay. So one of the questions is how important is a virtual tour to have on your website? And I do think that is important. Our e-expectations research will also tell you that students say they would like to see that. They like to see videos on your website, but it has to be short. So if whatever you're putting that is a virtual experience, that's a video, they can see current students, they want that capability on your website, but the trick is they're going to give you about a minute or two, which is very difficult. They're not going to give you a whole lot of time to either, show the tour or show a video. They do want this to be, pretty quick. And again, for the person that asked that question, I would point you to our e-expectations research where there is more information. We have another question about, do these strategies apply to graduate recruitment? I would say absolutely yes. In addition to campuses asking us about, help with international, help with adult students, we have also seen a huge increase in graduate recruitment and asking for Noel Levitz to come and help with the graduate plan. And oftentimes when we build a communications flow for graduates, many of the same things that I talked about apply. Now, again, I think we have to consider that for the graduate student, they're going to be more like an adult student, so they will have different factors that will, lead them to enrollment. Convenience, cost, obviously the academic program will be much more important. And we do have a factors to enroll specific for graduate students that you would find on our website as well. So the answer is yes. I think it definitely applies to graduate students as well. So let me see if I have other questions online. Okay, there's a question. I'm not sure I completely understand it, but it's a question about sort of who's responsible for the communications plan. And I do think that sort of varies by campus. But to me, the important thing is what I talked about earlier, that you do have to have an enrollment management, sort of team. And I think, one part of this question that someone is asking is if we're trying to get information about what our graduates are doing, for example, whose responsibility is that? Oftentimes the school will tell me I need to get that information from our placement office or our career counseling office, and it's difficult to get that information. My advice would be not to go that route. I think that your faculty are often the best resource. And so, who's going to know about recent graduates and what they have done? Very likely, the faculty are the ones that will know that. So I think it's important to, when you have regular meetings, that you bring in a representative from each one of your areas, bring in a faculty representative to help you answer questions like, what are some of the exciting courses our students take?
tell me a little bit about our faculty and some of their experience, and what do students do with a degree from our institution. Give me specific examples of job opportunities, internship opportunities, and graduate school placements. So I think often for admissions, for example, that does have to start with the admissions team and then getting that information from the faculty. If you kind of sit around and wait for someone to give you that information, and that may sound kind of crass, but I'm speaking from experience, you'll never get it. You need to ask, and I would advise you to ask the faculty. I think they're the best. They're going to be your best resource for that.
On 1 minute.
Thank you, Sarah. So our screen has just blanked out again. I think our computer keeps changing it. I want to wrap up by saying thank you for really hanging in with us, Sarah, and everyone in the audience. Sarah does a lot of these webinars, quite a bit for people around the country, but we've never had to deal with the dual aspect of having a webinar with webinar software connecting to people in a live room with microphones and telephones. So thank you everyone for helping us to pull this off. I think it's a first for us.
6513.
Someone needs to mute their phone, I
There's someone online
think.
that needs to mute their phone.
Yes, and I'm not sure if they can hear me. So I think that everyone joining us today will be taking home some useful and meaningful strategies that can improve they can use to improve their own campuses come Monday morning. And I really appreciate your take charge attitude, Sarah, because we were figuring this out until late last night. So Greg, right here next to me, and Heather up on stage. We're here until 11 o'clock last night, I've heard from someone else, making sure all this technology would actually work. So thank you so much to our Bay Path team.
Thank you so much.
And to Dr. Loper and Ann Canton. So I would like to, again, remind you that enrollment management is one of our most popular focuses here at Bay Path in our online higher education administration master's program. And we hosted the event today, and if you're interested or you have staff who are interested, please check out our website to see what that's about. And I would love to thank everyone in the room for driving so far. Many people told me you drove an hour to be here. And I would love to have you grab a Danish on your way out the door, please. So please join us next year at Bay Path for our next Hot Topics event and our nonprofit management Hot Topics in January. Thank you, everyone.
And Dr. Way, may I add one thing, please?
Sure.
I want to just let everyone know, since we did have to go to Plan B, and I know we had a few technical glitches here, if there's anyone either in the room or on the line, if you would like me to do this presentation or meet with you over the phone, if you want to do this presentation with a small group on your own campus, I would be more than happy to do that. So please just email me and let me know, and we'll set that up. And I also want to just echo my thanks to Greg and Ann and all of the folks that I have never met at Bay Path. You all have been great, and I know you worked late into the evening and early into the morning to make sure that this could work. And so I really, really appreciate your support, and it's been great, at least being with you virtually.
Thank you, Sarah. And I will see you in Chicago at the Noel Levitz Conference in July.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all so much.
Bye. Have a good morning.
Bye-bye.